Hello and welcome to the Focusing Way podcast. I'm your host, David Battistella. Please share this podcast with others as a way of introducing them to the people, themes, concepts, and beauty of focusing. All the links are on the website. Now, on to the good stuff. Today on the Focusing Way podcast, we open up into a new direction, speaking with non-focusers who, in their own unique way, have lived a focusing life. Many years ago, I joined a community website called Creative Cow. Eventually, I became a leader on that website, and I got to know Ron and Kathleen Lindeboom, the creators of it. They created an online community like no other, a place on the internet that was moderated and full of healthy discussion and media professionals sharing and helping one another. I caught up with Ron Lindeboom at his home in Arizona and had a wonderful conversation about community building and life. Ronald and Kathleen Lindeboom first pioneered web-based communities for media professionals in digital video in 1995, and from this early beginning grew a vital international community that grew to well over 2 million unique visitors a month under their leadership. As CEO of Creative Cow LLC and later the publisher of Creative Cow magazine, Ronald drew on a wide range of skills developed during his 40-year career in media, marketing, and business management. The Creative Cow website today serves over 1.3 million monthly unique visitors from around the world, even in a world of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and a myriad of other competitors. And joining me now is Ron Lindeboom. Ron, thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's an honor, David. I really have followed you for many years, so it's nice to be here with you today.
Yeah, this is taking us in a bit of a different direction for the podcast, one which I appreciate. And I appreciate that you're here because you've had such a role in creating such an important and large online community and building a community. And but maybe just before we go there, could you just start with a little bit of your background in internet communication or internet communities?
Well, where it all started was Kathleen and I bought a Media 100 long, long ago, back in '94, and we couldn't find any help or support. We were driving from Central California up to San Francisco to go to a users group meeting because it was the only place we knew where we could learn. And one night we were driving home from the meeting and it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and we're driving home from San Francisco for 5 or 6 hours. And we just said, there's got to be a better way. And Kathleen and I talked about it until we came up with the idea of building an online community. And we started first with the old CompuServe listserv groups, the news groups, if you remember those. And that didn't work so well. Then we tried building a listserv itself. That didn't work so well. Then in June of '95, we launched our first online web-based community. That one took off. That grew like a weed, and that grew into Creative Cow, and Creative Cow grew to the point where at one point it was over 2.3 million unique people a month, and today, even with Twitter and Facebook and just seemingly endless other communities out there, the Cow still at this point today gets between 1.2 to 1.3 million unique visitors every month.
Wow, that is a big community. And just for people that don't remember the Media 100, it's a digital nonlinear editing system. And I go back in my professional career as a film editor, having used that, and I can fully appreciate those days before the start of the internet, the Windows 95 internet. There were not a lot of places to, when you were on the front end of that technology, not even the manufacturers or the salespeople really understood how to use it, but they were selling it. And so it was really up to users to figure out this technology. And every time we'd run into a problem, there were very few places to turn. So there was there's a little window in there of this kind of technology that created, sometimes late nights and wanting to pull your hair out. But it was nice to finally find community. And I guess, you know, I became part of that Creative Cow community in the spirit of learning and giving. And my whole impetus for that would be that if I could be in that community and even eventually become a leader in that community, I could, through sort of forced reading and helping other people, I could learn a lot myself and then pass on the things that I was learning. So it's beautiful sort of, for me, it's become the model of what an online experience should be. But, a recent theme of this podcast, and you mentioned list serves as well, and I know I'm on a focusing discussion list still, which I get an email digest every day. So the focusing community, would understand that, because there's many people still getting their information through those kind of list serves. But the recent theme on this podcast has been around building community. And you built this large online community. And you've just talked about the origins of it, but what were the kind of things what did you learn? What did you really learn about community as you were building a community that was reaching out to people across the web and the whole world?
Well, one of the most interesting ways to put it was a multi-billion-dollar publishing empire. If you remember United Entertainment Media, UEM, who were a London-based publishing conglomerate, called one day and we answered the phone and they had us on a speakerphone in the boardroom. They had just sold all their assets that they had bought. Miller Freeman, who was the old TV magazine, videography, CMP books, CMP. You remember all that. They they spent almost $700 million chasing us, trying to put us out of business. And they even told us in this meeting that they had us on, and they had just sold all of their assets to Nube for $48 million, the leftovers. And they asked me, they said, how on earth did you do this? How did you take $700 million and turn it into this? And I said, it's easy. And they said, well, what's the formula? I said, well, I'll tell you because you won't believe me that the answer is this simple. And so you'll never do it because you won't believe the answer is this simple. And I told them, I said, what you don't understand is that Kathleen and I never claimed to be leaders. We claimed to be nothing more than servants. And we're kids who grew up remembering that old verse that says the one who would become great would be the servant of all. And our goal was to serve the people that we knew who really were on the front lines. We were on the front lines to a point, and in the very beginning, we definitely were on the front line, and we were creating most of the content, most of the support, and that drew people to us. But at a certain point, it shifted gears, and we learned that we like to say, we may be a flea, but we'll shake a bridge riding on an elephant's ear. And we knew who those elephants were. We could see the big ones. And that's why when our first community went under, if you remember, a big publishing company bought it and ended up cheating us out of our investment and sicked their lawyers on us. And the next thing you know, all 5 years' work went up in vapor. We got nothing out of it. We ended up with a check for $100 and a hearty hand clasp and a farewell. So we opened up Creative Cow, and all of the big cows, if you will, that we knew followed us, and all of the newer calves, if you will, followed them. And so the people that had known us followed us, and we followed that same formula again. We just wanted to help the people that were really the ones doing the work to be better at their craft, to help them be better at what they did. And in doing that, we built this massive community. And I told the people from UEM Media when they called, I said, what you did was you tried to convince everybody that you were pontiffs and that you were all these, you know, we carry this heavy burden as journalists who we have a journalistic responsibility. And what you didn't understand is that already the community had figured out that the people in the trenches were the ones who were defining the rules. They were making things up. So that's why when we founded Creative Cow magazine, it took off like a rocket when everybody laughed and said, "You can't build a magazine. All the magazines are going out of business." But I knew that they had missed their opportunity and had forgotten what they really needed to be doing. And that was serving the people who really had the answers. So when we launched Creative Cow magazine, we made sure that the magazine was built around people. We had no staff writers. Whatever the subject was, we reached into the cow community and we pulled out those people who were telling the real story, and we ghost wrote all those articles, and we would put their name on it because it was their story. So we would help them pin it, but they would tell us what to write, and then we'd put their name on it and stick it in the Cow magazine, and the magazine took off like a rocket.
Where and how did the idea for the cow, the pasture, the fact that an online community, yours, is represented, and it's creativecow.net for those of you listening and want to see, but an incredible resource for digital creatives, and it's an incredible community that shares like no other online community I've ever been in or experienced. But where did that idea of the cow, the pasture, where did all that come from?
Oh, that's fun. I grew up on a dairy, and I'm a dairy kid. And when you're a dairy kid in Orange County, California, all your friends are going surfing. Christmas holiday comes along, spring break comes along, summer vacation. But when you're a dairy kid, you work. You just, cows got to eat twice a day, they got to be milked twice a day. And when you come from a long line of Dutch dairy farmers like I did, you learn to appreciate cows. You also learn the limits and the horror of being a dairy kid, because you don't get to take the breaks that all your friends do. So when I got older and I met Kathleen, and the first time I went over to her house was full of cows, and she was a cow collector. And I thought, this is very cool. And And so when we lost our first business, we wanted a really cool name. And so Kathleen was saying, well, Electric Kitty, Creative Kitty. Uh, what she really wanted, and she said this, was I want a name that's as fun and as wacky as Turbo Squid. Remember Turbo Squid?
Yeah, yeah, I do remember that.
And she said, I want a name that's like Turbo Squid. And so we just kept on playing with names. And so eventually one day she said, well, Creative Cow. And I looked at her and I said, that's it. And it was. And it was only after the fact that after we came up with the whole concept of Creative Cow that we realized once the site had already, opened and it was already getting traffic and signing up members, that's when we realized that we could reach back into our heredity of the earlier community we had built, which was the Worldwide Users Group site and the WUG, as we called it. But we realized that we could take back our heredity because COW could be an acronym for communities of the world.
Mm.
And that was unintended. That was completely by accident, David. We realized one day, oh my goodness, this is creative communities of the world. And so it became.
Wow, that is it's so nice because it's one of those beautiful things that we also experience in focusing, of having a sort of a very organic thing, that the thing comes from somewhere within you and not something that is sort of forced. And that's one thing also that my experience on this website was always one of kind of authenticity. And I mean that in a way that people use their real names online and they were who they were. And as far as I know, like, yours is one of the first communities that just acknowledges and allows people to be fully themselves, like real human beings online, where the internet prior to that was kind of this gray space where people had handles and were anonymous and didn't use their real names, and that still exists in the internet and it's still a very important part of it. But there was something about how you created a community where there was a lot of tolerance, but how did you deal with that, with like creating an online space that was so clean in a way? That's the best way I can, or safe even, is another word I would use.
Well, one of the things that was the ugliest episode, I mean, not everything, as you know, in life is the days of wine and roses, and we definitely had our times where things got intense, and one of those was when we set the policy of real names, and we said, it got things started getting ugly, and we said, you will be responsible for what you say. We will hold you accountable. We will moderate. We took so much heat because we were one of the first communities, and maybe even the first, that moderated, that read every post that went up. I mean, it was huge, and it took many of us. And as you know, David, you were part of it. We actually did know what was going on in the forums. We were aware of the conversations, and if the signal to noise ratio dropped, we would delete things and we would hold you accountable. And boy, did that anger people. They would rail and kick and claw and scream that we were destroying everything about the internet. the anonymity and the ability to say what you wanted without being accountable. Well, the very thing we wanted was accountability. And so we put leaders' pictures up. I mean, we put your picture up.
Mm-hmm.
And, faces. We even had that feature for years. We had faces of the worldwide users group. And that really helped reinforce the idea that these are real people doing real things, and they are truly accountable for their words and the things that they're saying. And it took years. I mean, we took so much heat. We got blasted at one point, got crucified for about a year, where some of the most powerful people on the internet at the time just took us apart because of our moderating and it's funny nowadays they moderate,
Yeah.
they censor, they do all the things that they crucified us for. But the hilarious part is, in the end, like Tim Wilson likes to say, Ron, they all went the way you guys did years ago.
Yeah, and to remind people, we're talking about 1995 through about 2000. This is pre-Facebook. This is before people are tweeting. This is an online community where people are going there as creative people, as people who need to figure out problems with the software that they're using, or this new digital realm that's on their, at their keyboard and at their fingertips. And now this becomes kind of the Napster of digital education, where you could go into a website and type a question about, how to fix something in a certain kind of software that you're using, and the answers are there for you. And it's being done in this kind of egalitarian way. The community is not paid, but people are recognizing the value in this kind of exchange. And what I'm wondering from you is, like, going through that experience, because what I've learned about moderating over the years is people reveal themselves whether they're using their name or not. You have a good sense of who they really are, what their essence is, and by reading them in a forum. And so I guess what I'm asking is, what how did that create a kind of an authenticity, and what did you learn about human behavior and human nature by studying how people behaved online?
Oh, we always looked for, I always like to say, if you give me the people with attitude and enthusiasm, I'll build you an empire. And so what we did is we looked for the people that cared, that had attitude. They knew they had been given a talent. You know, you don't want the people that believe their talent precludes them from having to have civility. You get those people that think their talent gives them an excuse to be jerks.
Mm.
And you know, those people you keep at arm's distance. But you watch people and you can see that there are people that truly care about the fact that somebody in that room has a problem. They have an answer. And it's what I used to tell the leaders: please don't answer every question. You don't have to have the frustration of answering the newbie questions that come into the room. In fact, don't answer those. Think of yourself as you're the one that's helping direct the group and keep it on track, heading it to the high ground. But let those newer members that they have attitude too. They want to help. They want to get in there and feel like they contributed something. let them answer the newbie question because I only got one answer. I only know one thing, and this person is asking that. So, boom, there's my answer. And now I feel good about myself because I helped that person. I may not have two answers, I only got one, and I got to play my chip. And you make room for people, you make room for the newer users. You make room for the absolute newbie. I remember a lot of our leaders left because they said, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And they forgot one of the most important lessons about being human is that we are all newbies at one time or another. We're all going to be starting out. Like right now, I'm learning the most complicated software tool I ever learned in my life. And my brain is smoking right now, and I am reduced yet again at 67 years of age to being the abject, absolute newbie.
There's a beauty in this kind of being a perpetual student and opening and being open to new learning. And it just reminds me, I'll share this story because I recently re-interviewed a subject of one of my documentaries who I got to know and first interviewed when he was 82, and he's a priest here in Florence, Italy, and he's turned 88 years old, and I thought it would be nice to go back and talk to him again. And I asked him, you know, whether his spirituality had changed from the first time we had spoken. And he said, every day. That was his answer. And I just admired that so much that even at 88, he's learning and listening and being present to the day. And as you talk about that experience that you're having right now, that is such a beautiful thing to hear for me.
It's fun. I'm the kind of person that my brain will stagnate, and I will get to where if I don't have a challenge and something to really sink my teeth into, I will mentally and spiritually atrophy.
Mm.
And I choose to always be trying to push my limits. And that's why I'm working on whole new things. And, you know, I had to chuckle yesterday. Somebody wrote me and asked, do you read books or do you listen to audiobooks? And I said, well, both and more, please. If I got to read articles online, I'll do that. And if you send me PDFs, I'm going to read them too.
Mm-hmm.
Why limit yourself? The world is so full of ideas, like in your podcast. When I was sitting and listening to some of your episodes in your podcast, there are so many ways to learn today that it's a remarkable time to be alive. It really is.
I totally concur. I think we are living in the most amazing times, and my basic gratitude happens, right after I wake up, and I realize, I'm just grateful for the day, and it's a pretty beautiful thing. But
we came up with, out of that very idea, this very concept is why I knew that Creative Cow magazine would succeed when we had no money. We were just getting our feet under us after having lost our previous business and walked away with no money from it, and just all the horror of what we went through. And we had just begun to really begin to build the prominence and the power that was becoming Creative Cow in its early day. And we were at a trade show. And I won't say who the magazine was. We had done a trade advertising deal with them, booth space for promoting their show at the convention center. We would give them advertising to promote their event. They would give us booth space. Well, when we got there, they moved our booth to the far back corner. They took away our booth position that had been assigned to us and put us all the way in the back, in the far back corner. I mean, you could fire a cannon up the aisle and not hit a soul. And we were so far out of the flow of traffic that the song Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap by AC/DC comes to mind. And it was so funny. Kathleen and I are sitting back there in our booth. We're kind of heartsick, and we're watching the crowd. And we're looking at their faces because nobody's coming by. We're just back in the hinterlands all by ourselves. And all of a sudden it hit me, and I said to Kathleen, look at their faces. And this was in December of 2005. And we're saying, look at the faces on the people. They were abject. They were uninspired. They had lost vision. And I said to Kathleen, what happened to those people who had their Media 100s, that tool that was the first online broadcast quality finishing system that, if you remember, the early 2 or 3 seasons of Blue's Clues were done using a Media 100 that went right to air on Viacom, and Viacom had approved the Media 100's quality to go to air when everybody was saying that couldn't be done. And yet here's Blue's Clues being made by early Adobe After Effects when it was COSA After Effects, and the Media 100. And these people knew they had a tool greater than Gutenberg. If Gutenberg could make books, we can make our book come alive and move at 30 frames a second. We can do this. And the people were inspired. And suddenly here it is. It's like 10 years later, and they've lost the vision. And I said to Kathleen, I said, we're going to make a magazine so full of hope, so full of the belief that we have the tiger by the tail, and we've been given the greatest opportunity for tools that so exceed the generations that came before us, that we better believe in ourselves, we better believe in what we've been given, because what we have is the greatest opportunity that's ever been given to any generation to tell their story. And so we knew right then and there that Creative Cow magazine was going to work, and it did. It just came out of the gate and just took off, and within 5 years it had buried its competition, just buried them.
Stay tuned for part 2 of my conversation with Ronald Lindeboom. You've been listening to the Focusing Way podcast. For links and to subscribe, visit our website at thefocusingway.com. Follow us on Twitter at thefocusingway. Please share this podcast with others as a way of introducing them to the people, themes, concepts, and beauty of focusing. If you really enjoy this and want to support us, you can support us using Patreon as well. Until next time, I'm your host, David Battistella.